I showed up at my ex-boyfriend Charles's engagement party. Charles panicked as soon as he saw me, rushing over to grab my arm and whisper, "Don't make a scene, Diana. You can't ruin this for me." I shot him a cold glance and walked straight toward Marcus. "Marcus Anderson, I'm pregnant." "It's your child." Marcus Anderson stared at the pregnancy test in my hand for a long while, his expression unreadable. Then he gently pulled me to sit beside him, wrapping his arm around my shoulder with a smile and said, "Well, if it's mine, then I'll take responsibility." Charles's engagement party was quite the spectacle. I stood at the entrance for a moment, watching him greet guests with that familiar enthusiasm, and I couldn't help but feel a mocking smile creep up on my lips. The thought of how Charles had once sweet-talked me, only to turn around and marry his childhood friend, Emma, was enough to make me sick. One moment, he'd be telling me he loved me, and the next, he'd be cozying up to another woman. It was repulsive. Guests passed in and out, but when Charles turned and caught sight of me, his face went pale. His eyes widened in surprise, then panic set in. He hurried over to me, blocking my way, and whispered urgently, "Diana, I've already explained everything. Don't cause a scene. Today is really important to me." He thought I was here to ruin his engagement, but that wasn't my goal today. I shot him another cold look, my voice icy as I said, "Move. I'm here to find the father of my child." "What? The father of your child? I've never even touched you." I shoved him aside, ignoring his stunned expression, and made my way directly to the man sitting at the main table, the one who stood out most in the room. The moment I stopped in front of Marcus Anderson, the noise in the banquet hall seemed to quiet down. Everyone's eyes turned in my direction, but of course, they weren't focused on me, they were all on Marcus, Charles's uncle. Marcus always had that calm smile on his lips, his demeanor graceful and dignified, but if you looked closely, you could see a coldness in his eyes, something inscrutable and distant. Right now, he was looking at me with that same smile, his gaze asking me what this was all about. I pulled out the pregnancy test from my bag and handed it to him. "Marcus, I'm pregnant with your child," I said, my voice steady. Marcus studied the test for a long moment before his expression softened. He pulled me closer, settling me beside him, and casually draped his arm around my shoulder, still smiling. "If it's mine," he said with a hint of amusement, "then I'll take responsibility." After an eerie silence, the elderly man sitting next to Marcus suddenly slapped him on the shoulder and let out a hearty laugh. "So, Marcus has a girlfriend, and he's been hiding her from me, huh?" The room erupted into lively chatter. "Just the other day, we were saying there's probably no girl Marcus could like, turns out, he's got a kid on the way." Classic Marcus, quiet as ever, and now he's about to be a father. His dad must be relaxing now. Yeah, looks like Marcus has already surpassed Charles in life's race. When do we get to witness Marcus's love story unfold? Although everything I did today was intentional, choosing this event to confront Marcus was as much about provoking Charles as it was about anything else. Marcus was the one person Charles respected the most, the one he feared. If I could somehow become Marcus's wife, I'd become Charles's aunt-in-law, and from that moment on, he'd have to treat me with some respect. I'd thought of many ways Marcus might react, but I never imagined he'd admit to everything so easily, let alone act as though we were truly a couple, playing the role of a loving pair. But the truth was, our interactions had been limited to only a few fleeting encounters and one night together. In total, we probably hadn't exchanged more than 20 words. The warmth of his palm seeped through my arm, sending a flush of heat through my entire body. It was almost unbearable, and I grew increasingly self-conscious. Just then, Charles hurried over, his face twisted in frustration. "Diana, what the hell are you doing?" I straightened up, regaining my composure. "I told you, I'm here to find my child's father." Charles turned to Marcus in disbelief, his voice filled with incredulity. "Marcus, are you the father?" Marcus's smile flickered, just a touch. "Charles," he said in a low voice, "Emma, your fiancée, has been waiting for you for a while now. You should go." His tone was light, but there was a clear warning in it. Sure enough, Charles hesitated, glancing between me and Marcus, before finally backing off and walking away. And so, I spent the rest of Charles's engagement party as Marcus's child's mother. The attention that had once been focused entirely on Charles shifted to Marcus and me. Most notably, Ryan Anderson, Marcus's father and Charles's grandfather, watched us intently the entire time. He smiled at us both, asked about my relationship with Marcus, and showed an almost excessive interest in my life. Marcus remained calm, and I made an effort to do the same. But deep down, I began to regret choosing today to confront him. Some things should have been handled privately. At last, when the event wrapped up, Marcus offered to take me home. He sent the driver away, took the wheel himself, but didn't start the car right away. Instead, he pulled out a cigar, holding it casually in his hand, never lighting it, as if he were lost in thought. The silence between us was unsettling, and I almost couldn't bear it any longer. Just as I was about to break it, Marcus spoke up. "Go on," he said, his voice even. "Tell me. Who's the father?" I froze, meeting his cold, detached, all-knowing gaze. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then, I snapped, anger boiling over. "What do you mean? Are you denying it now?" Marcus tugged at the corner of his lips, his tone as smooth and calm as ever. "You've misunderstood. I'm not the type of person to deny what I've done. But..." His words shifted, his smile deepened, but his eyes grew colder. "I didn't touch you." 2 men had now told me this on the same day. I was so furious I could barely contain myself. They hadn't touched me, yet I was supposed to believe that the child growing inside me was self-conceived? My breath was uneven as I tried to control my emotions. "Marcus, if you don't want to take responsibility, just say it. I came to find you today knowing full well you might deny it. After all, that night, we were unconscious. It was an accident. I also chose today to confront you here, partly to provoke Charles. Yes, I used you, and I admit that. But you don't have to humiliate me like this." Marcus fell silent for a moment, then spoke patiently. "If I wanted to humiliate you, I wouldn't have played along with your little act earlier. Mrs. Collins, I'm telling you the truth. I didn't touch you." His words were so certain, so confident, that it made me question everything. Wasn't it him? But that night, on the yacht during Charles's birthday party, I had seen Charles and Emma kissing in the hallway bathroom. In a fit of rage, I drank a lot of alcohol. I also remembered that it was Marcus who had taken me back to my room. Perhaps he was just being considerate, making sure I got back safely after I'd gotten drunk. But my mind, clouded by alcohol, had kept replaying the image of Charles betraying me. I was hurt and furious, desperate to find a way to let it out. At the time, I hadn't known that the girl in the hallway was Charles's childhood friend Emma, chosen by his family. I had thought it was because I was too conservative, unwilling to sleep with Charles before marriage, and that he had simply given in to temptation. In my intoxicated state, I'd wrapped my arms around Marcus's neck and said, "What's the big deal about sex? If he thinks it's so casual, so unimportant, and he can sleep with anyone, then I can too." I had been the one to pull him closer, even forcing myself on him. But I had done it. I knew it. Even though I woke up alone in bed the next morning, my body remembered, it felt what had happened. Could it be? I gasped, suddenly realizing what I was asking. "That night on the yacht, didn't you take me back to my room?" Marcus nodded. "Then wasn't it you who slept with me that night?" He paused for a moment before answering. "Yes, it was." "Then how can you say you didn't touch me?" Marcus paused for a moment, a slight furrow between his brows as though he were facing some difficult situation. This was a rare expression on the face of the man who was usually so composed, so confident in every move he made. Under my unblinking gaze, he shifted slightly, tapping his tongue against his cheek, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he gave a reluctant explanation. "I didn't make myself clear enough. Yes, I did spend the night with you, but I certainly didn't get you pregnant." "What?" I asked, barely able to process what I was hearing. Marcus squeezed his cigar until it was nearly crushed. That night I used my hand. After saying that, he seemed to flush, a faint blush creeping up his ears. But honestly, I wasn't concerned with whether his ears were flushed from alcohol or something else. All I could think about was his words, I used my hand. I didn't have much experience, but I wasn't stupid enough to not know that using your hand wouldn't result in a pregnancy. But still, I couldn't believe it, I was definitely pregnant. I stared at Marcus, suspicion rising. You're not lying to me, are you? After all, I was so drunk that night, and I don't even remember what exactly happened. How can I be sure? Marcus seemed irritated with my repeated doubts, his tone growing more insistent. I told you, if I did something, I would take responsibility for it. If you're still unsure, we can do a paternity test after the baby is born. If it's mine, I'll make sure the child gets everything they deserve. I pursed my lips, thinking that I hadn't actually decided whether or not I wanted to keep the baby. Perhaps, I muttered, after that night, you've been with someone else. No. Marcus snapped, his voice sharp and firm. Absolutely not. I cut him off, my emotions flaring up. That night was an accident. It was the only time I've ever done something so reckless. I'd been with Charles for 2 years, and we never slept together. How could I suddenly, in such a short time, sleep with multiple men? For some reason, when I finished speaking, Marcus's expression softened slightly. He told me to fasten my seatbelt, his voice calm. Then let's go to the hospital and check again. A pregnancy test isn't always accurate. Marcus took me to the hospital for an examination, and his presence outside the gynecology clinic was nothing short of attention-grabbing. Many of the pregnant women waiting with their husbands couldn't help but stare at Marcus, before quickly glancing back at their own husbands with clear disdain and regret. It was my first time in this department, and I couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed. But when the doctor finally told me, "Young lady, you're experiencing false pregnancy symptoms. It's likely due to hormonal fluctuations. You're not actually pregnant. But don't be disappointed. Your body looks healthy, and that man outside, is he your husband? If you two try, you'll definitely have a baby with great genes." I was left in a daze. I stumbled out of the examination room, feeling far more embarrassed to face Marcus than I had to face the doctor. Marcus had been standing outside the door, waiting for me, not checking his phone or getting distracted by anything. He was focused, waiting for me to come out and tell him the result. "So," he asked, his voice calm but expectant. I felt like I could cry, my head hanging low. "No. I'm not pregnant." The doctor said it was a false pregnancy. There was a brief silence before I suddenly heard Marcus let out a soft laugh. Is this disappointment? I quickly denied it, flustered. How could I be disappointed? I just feel embarrassed. Sorry. It's fine, he said, his tone surprisingly gentle. It's partly my fault too. I should have checked in with you sooner. We walked out of the hospital together, and I was so embarrassed that I just wanted to get away from him as quickly as possible. But Marcus, as usual, had other plans. Used me, then want to throw me away, he said lightly, his gaze fixed ahead. How about I treat you to a meal? I offered awkwardly. Marcus smiled, his trademark smile that always seemed a bit distant yet friendly. No need for a meal. The thing is, everyone knows you're carrying my child now, and it's not something we can just explain away quickly. What do you mean? You saw my father, Ryan, right? Marcus said with a hint of resignation. Today, you made him happy. If we just back out now, he's likely going to kill me. I scratched my head, feeling uncomfortable. Can't you just explain it to him? It's not that easy, Marcus replied, his voice serious. Ryan's been pushing me to settle down for years. He's getting older and can't handle too much shock. I've always had to humor him. But today, you staged this little drama, and he bought into it. Now, it's hard for me to explain things away. At the very least, I need to give him some time to process it. Can't let him get too emotional too quickly. His health can't take it. I fell silent, absorbing his words. Marcus was the youngest in the Anderson family. When he was born, Ryan Anderson was already nearing 60. So while Marcus was still young, his father was likely feeling the pressure of wanting him to marry, perhaps out of fear that time was running out for him. But the truth was, I didn't want to be tangled up with the Anderson family anymore. I had already done the impulsive things I shouldn't have, and Charles was engaged to someone else. Everything should end here, but the events of today were also my doing. It's okay, take some time to think it over. If you have any conditions, feel free to bring them up. I'll take you home first, Marcus said, his tone still measured and composed. With his polite attitude, I had no choice but to accept and get in the car. On the way, Marcus suddenly asked, "So, why me?" He tapped his fingers lightly on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed ahead. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge of curiosity. "That night, your only moment of impulse, why did you choose me?" I hesitated, then mumbled, "I don't really know. I was drunk, just grabbed someone at random. Maybe it was just a coincidence." I dodged the question, not telling him the full truth. I knew it was him. The yacht for Charles's birthday had been Marcus's. He was the host, and he was always the most prominent figure in any setting. Though we barely interacted, I remembered him vividly. That wasn't entirely Charles's fault. He respected Marcus deeply, almost feared him, but without a doubt, he admired him too. He often brought up Marcus's achievements in front of me, painting a picture of a man I already knew before I even met him. Not to mention his striking looks, one meeting, and his image was forever engraved in my memory. But why did I pick him, out of all people, that night? Maybe because of his connection to Charles. Maybe I wanted to use him to provoke Charles. Or maybe it was something else. I couldn't really explain it, so I decided to just forget about it. After a brief pause, I threw the question back at him. "What about you? Why didn't you touch me? I mean, have sex with me?" I didn't know whether to be relieved or confused. Should I be thankful for his restraint, or wonder if I wasn't attractive enough? Marcus hesitated for a moment before answering, his voice still steady. "Like you said, it wasn't supposed to be casual. It wasn't supposed to be something with anyone. It needed to have meaning, an occasion, not just because of someone else's mistake that made you doubt yourself. You were drunk. I didn't want you to wake up and regret a moment of physical pleasure. But you were insistent, wanting something to happen. I couldn't really avoid it, so I had no choice but to comfort you with my hands." "Enough!" I shouted, my face burning. "We don't need to go any further with this." Marcus glanced at me, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He fell silent, clearly sensing that I didn't want to discuss it any longer. Before getting out of the car, I said to Marcus, "I can play along with your little act." "You're right," Marcus replied smoothly. "I was the one who took the initiative that night on the yacht, and I'm taking the initiative today. I'm not someone who shirks responsibility. If I've caused you trouble, I'll help you resolve it, if you need me to." The reason I changed my mind was probably because of what he'd said just moments before. It touched something inside me. Marcus smiled. "Diana, I really admire your straightforwardness." We exchanged numbers, and a week later, he sent me a message. It was short and to the point, "Are you free tonight? I need you to come home with me for dinner." It was the weekend, so I had time. I didn't hesitate, telling Marcus I'd be downstairs waiting for him after he finished with whatever he was doing. When he left, he messaged me to let me know. I went downstairs early to wait. But as I stood there, I unexpectedly ran into Charles, who had come looking for me. Seeing him instantly soured my mood. Charles walked up to me, furrowing his brow. "Diana, don't do this. I know you're angry with me, but you shouldn't mess with Marcus. I know what you're doing, trying to provoke me. You and Marcus can't work. That man is complicated. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I laughed, dismissing his words. I don't understand. What does any of this have to do with you? Diana, stop being stubborn. I want to marry you, but my family won't allow it. My father insists I marry Emma. Our family status, it's complicated. There are many things I can't decide for myself. The disgust welled up in me as I retorted, yes, you're from some prestigious family, and I'm just a nobody. If you knew you couldn't choose who to be with, why did you even date me in the first place? That's not it. I really like you. I thought I could fight for us, like Marcus does. Marcus can just ignore all the rules and do whatever he wants. I thought if I kept pushing, I could do the same. But I'm not like Marcus, Charles admitted quietly, his voice dropping. He's a genius. Even without his family name, he's still great. But I'm not like him. Charles lowered his head, a defeated look on his face. I can't compete with him. I can't fight against my family. But... Suddenly, he raised his head, grabbing my shoulders urgently. Someone like him isn't someone you should provoke. If you cross him, he won't let it end well for you. I tried to shake him off, but he gripped me tighter, his eyes filled with desperation. Give me a little more time. Once I'm stable, I'll divorce Emma. If you're willing to wait for me, I'll marry you. I promise you, one day, I will marry you. I forcefully wrenched his hands off my shoulders. Are you out of your mind, Charles? You think you're some big deal? Where do you get the confidence that I'm going to wait for you? From the way you talk, you're not even happy with your childhood friend. When you kissed her, you looked pretty content. You didn't seem unhappy at your engagement party either. As a car slowly approached, Marcus rolled down the window and called out softly, "Have you been waiting long?" I shook my head, getting into Marcus's car under Charles's shocked gaze. It seemed that only then did Marcus notice Charles. You're here too? Didn't you have dinner plans with Ryan? Aren't you leaving together? Charles stood frozen, looking completely disoriented. I couldn't help but raise my voice with a hint of malice. Marcus is asking you, Charles, do you want to join us? Charles's face turned pale and then flushed, his eyes darting around nervously. He shook his head. No, it's fine. You two go ahead. I still have something to take care of. Marcus nodded, signaling the driver to start the car. Last time, Ryan was probably so caught up in the surprise of his son Marcus having a girlfriend that he didn't ask any of the key questions. And with the vague way I spoke to Marcus, he still doesn't know that I'm Charles's ex-girlfriend. So, I said to Marcus, if your father knew I'm Charles's ex, and knew I wasn't actually pregnant, he might support us breaking up. Marcus smiled, maybe, you can give it a try later. I was confident. There's no way any parent would accept something like this. If Charles happens to be here later, then it would be a direct confrontation. Ryan Anderson might get upset, but at least it's better than dragging it out too long before breaking up. Most importantly, I didn't want to waste any more time playing this charade. But Marcus's father, just like him, doesn't follow the usual rules. When I told Ryan I wasn't pregnant, he seemed disappointed but immediately reassured me, it's okay, you're still young, there will be plenty of chances in the future. When I mentioned I was Charles's ex, Ryan shrugged it off, I figured that out last time. Charles is nothing like Marcus, Marcus is more reliable. Breaking up with Charles was the right choice. Just like that? Such a big family have a high tolerance for family ethics. Later, I found out that Ryan's tolerance was reserved solely for Marcus. The first 4 children of the Fu family were each given a mission and raised with strict rules. Only Marcus was granted freedom and indulgence. It's said that, initially, Marcus's upbringing was just as strict, but he rebelled. He was the only one in the Anderson family brave enough to challenge Ryan. At just 7 years old, Marcus negotiated with Ryan to secure his rights and freedom, and he succeeded. Since then, Ryan not only stopped restricting him but also spoiled him even more. What was even more bizarre was that, despite Ryan's obvious favoritism, none of the other children complained. In fact, they all doted on Marcus as well. My plan was ruined, and all I could do was force a stiff smile and continue playing along with Marcus in this charade. He, on the other hand, was completely composed, as if he knew exactly what Ryan would say all along. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been fooled, but Marcus didn't seem like the type of person to do that. Tonight was the Anderson family's annual gathering, where everyone would be back, meaning Marcus was going to introduce me as his girlfriend to the entire family, including Charles. Everyone seemed to know about my existence, and no one was surprised. They greeted me kindly, as if whatever Marcus chose was beyond questioning. Only Charles looked furious. As the family laughed and joked about when Marcus and I would get married, Charles suddenly slammed his fork onto the table, stood up with red-rimmed eyes, and asked Marcus sharply, "Marcus, you're with my ex-girlfriend, don't you think that's a violation of family ethics? Not to mention, I just broke up with Diana. When did you get together with her? You've been eyeing her for a while, haven't you?" Charles. How could you talk to Marcus like that? The atmosphere froze instantly. I was also shocked. While I did have a bit of a desire to provoke Charles as some form of revenge, I never expected him to publicly say something like this. Marcus slowly took a sip of red wine, elegantly wiped his lips, and then lifted his gaze toward Charles. He still wore that faint smile, but the air around him felt noticeably colder. I instinctively shifted a little to the side. Well, why don't you tell me? What exactly about me being with her violates any ethics? Did you break up with her because of me? Marcus's tone was cool and even, impossible to read for anger or amusement. You're already engaged. Does Diana need to report to you about who she's dating? Or should I report to you? Marcus, that's not what Charles meant. He just doesn't think before he speaks, don't take it personally, Charles's mother quickly tried to explain. But Marcus didn't look at her. He kept his eyes fixed on Charles, the smile still lingering at his lips, but now his brows were lowered, and his expression had gained an edge, far sharper than before. Besides, even if I'd been secretly in love with her for a while, what then? At this, everyone except Ryan looked shocked. Including me. His tone, his manner, this didn't sound like a joke. But, it had to be a joke, right? Charles turned deathly pale. I couldn't tell if Marcus's words had enraged him or scared him, but it was clear that the brief moment of confrontation had drained all of his courage. Ryan, finally, spoke slowly, his voice calm as he addressed Charles, "If you're done making a scene, sit down and eat. If you want to keep causing trouble, I'll have them clear the table and we can have a full-on fight." The warning in his voice was unmistakable, and Charles's mother tugged at his sleeve, urging him, "Charles, apologize quickly." Charles slumped, his shoulders sagging as he muttered in a defeated tone, "Marcus, I'm sorry. It's my fault." Marcus, ever the gracious uncle, instantly switched gears, his earlier sharpness gone. "It's fine. Just don't let it happen again." "I don't mind, but you should show more respect to your future aunt-in-law." At that, Charles's face turned even whiter. I nearly choked on the words. Future aunt-in-law? I'd only said that offhandedly. Why did Marcus take it so seriously? I hoped he wasn't getting too deep into character. If I don't end up as his future aunt-in-law, this will be so embarrassing. Marcus gently patted my back, lifting my glass of water to my lips with a tenderness that could drown someone. "Be careful. Drink slowly." All eyes were on us. My face flushed bright red, my throat tickled from the cough, and I couldn't say a word, only drinking the water he offered. After dinner, Charles couldn't wait to leave and quickly found an excuse to head out. Marcus, however, still insisted on having me join him and his family for a game of mahjong. I wasn't particularly skilled at the game, but Marcus guided me, pressing a hand on my shoulder to make sure I sat down. From behind, he pointed out moves for me and even promised that if I lost, it would be on him. Whenever I hesitated for more than 3 seconds while looking at my hand, Marcus would lean over to help me make a move. The position was undeniably intimate, his chest pressing against my back as though pulling me closer into his embrace, his arm brushing past my hair or fingertips as he gestured to the tiles. His fresh scent lingered near my nose, suddenly bringing back memories of that night, which only made me feel more unsettled. Finally, the game ended, and Marcus drove me home, resuming his polite and distant demeanor. Unable to hold back, I asked, "Are there going to be a lot more events like this? This whole act is harder to pull off than I thought." I looked at Marcus expectantly, hoping he'd give me a negative answer. But instead, he smiled helplessly and said gently, "At least for the time being, it'll be quite frequent. This is the perfect time for everyone to think we're in a passionate romance. We have to play the part well. We'll need to go through the honeymoon phase first before it's convincing to break up." Seeing my frustrated expression, he added, "Besides, I just told Charles that you're going to be his future aunt-in-law. If we break up too soon, your revenge wouldn't have much impact, would it?" His reasoning did get me back on track. It was a bit satisfying to see Charles uncomfortable. If I had to be his aunt-in-law for a while longer, I could tolerate it. As Marcus had said, for the next period, he frequently took me to various social events to continue the charade. Soon enough, everyone who knew Marcus was aware of his girlfriend, Diana. I didn't quite understand why he had to go all out with the performance. Raising the rumor so widespread, wasn't he worried it would be hard to wrap it up later? During this time, Charles hadn't stopped contacting me. His messages were all the same, urging me to break up with Marcus, insisting that I was only with him to get back at him. He begged me to give him another chance, offering to break off his engagement with Emma if I would reconsider. I'd heard these words so many times that I was sick of them and ignored all his messages. I had lost interest in getting back at him. The only reason I was still playing along with Marcus was because I'd promised him I would. One evening, Marcus took me back to his place for dinner again. When we arrived, I overheard Charles and Ryan arguing. Why is it that Marcus can do whatever he wants, but I have to follow the family's plan? Marcus is strong enough to stand on his own. He doesn't need the Anderson family's support. Can you say the same? Can your father? I'm still young, how can you be so sure I can't do it? Alright, then prove yourself. If I do, I'll break up with Emma. I want to be with Diana. Damn it. That's Marcus's girlfriend, they're getting married. But she was my girlfriend before. Diana isn't an object. She has the right to choose who she wants to be with. Fine. If Diana is willing to be with me, will you guarantee that you won't interfere? That you won't favor Marcus? I sneaked a glance at Marcus, only to find that he had been staring at me with lowered eyes, deep in thought. It was a bit awkward. He must have been just as bewildered as I was. After all, this was just supposed to be an act, but Charles was turning it into some kind of competition with him. As soon as Charles stepped out of the door, he ran into Marcus and me, and paused for a moment. I was the first to react, casually linking my arm with Marcus's and giving Charles a sweet smile. Charles, I can tell you my decision right now, in the future, and in the next life, it will never be you. You don't have to act like I'm the one you can't live without. Even if the engagement was arranged by the family, you should have been the one to choose to sleep with Emma. Charles's face drained of color, leaving him speechless. I leaned even closer to Marcus, adopting a more affectionate tone. From now on, we're family. You'd better stop talking nonsense, it's not good for our reputation. Watching Charles walk away with a broken look on his face, I felt a rush of satisfaction. Suddenly, Marcus pulled his arm away. I snapped back to reality and looked at him, but he had already walked past me and into the study to speak with Ryan. I froze in place, a bit awkward and confused. The rest of the dinner was a blur. Marcus stayed cold and distant toward me. On the way back, he had the driver take me home while he didn't share the same car. I couldn't help but call out to him. Marcus, what's going on? Did I upset you by linking arms with you earlier? Did I make you angry? But you've done some intimate things with me before, and I didn't say anything. Marcus stopped in his tracks and turned back to face me. Are you happy with how you used me to make Charles uncomfortable just now? It clicked for me. You're mad because I used you? But isn't that what we're doing, using each other? Didn't you say that yourself? Marcus fell silent for a moment, before suddenly breaking into a smile. But there was an icy edge in his eyes, and a trace of sarcasm in his expression. Right, it's just a play. The act is over for today. You did your part. Go home now. With that cryptic remark, Marcus walked away quickly and got into another car, leaving me standing there, utterly confused. What the hell was going on with him? What did I do to upset him? After that day, I didn't see Marcus for over a month. He didn't reach out to me either. Honestly, given our relationship, I could have easily sent him a message and asked what was going on. But for some reason, I held back, pride, maybe? I didn't want to make the first move. The truth was, Marcus had left an undeniable impact on my mood, and I was in a constant state of frustration during that time. It only got worse when my coworkers started noticing. Are you sure you're okay? You seem down. Are you heartbroken? I bristled. How could I be? Heartbroken over what? I didn't even have a boyfriend, so who was I supposed to break up with? But Marcus hasn't come to see you in a while. You didn't break up, did you? That question made me grit my teeth. Damn Marcus, he'd turned this whole fake relationship into an open secret. Not only did his family know I was his girlfriend, but my coworkers did too. And now everyone seemed to think I was living in some fairy tale romance, with Marcus loving me deeply and treating me like a princess. The mess he'd left me to clean up, without a word of explanation, only made it worse. Now, people actually thought I'd been dumped. That evening, I went out for dinner with my coworkers. I wasn't in the best mood, so I ended up drinking a little too much. And once I was drunk, my emotions got the best of me. When I overheard my colleagues mentioning Marcus again, I couldn't hold it in. Diana, don't be stubborn. If you miss out on Marcus, you won't find someone like him again, one of them said. Yeah, Diana, he's way better than Charles, another added. Did you two have a fight? You're so headstrong, but with someone like Marcus, you can't be like with Charles. You need to apologize if you did something wrong. Marcus? When did this guy suddenly have such a strong presence in my life? Not only was he constantly on my mind, but now my coworkers were bringing him up all the time, too. It was infuriating. Why should I apologize? How would I know if we even broke up? He disappeared without a word. How was I supposed to figure out what happened? I was so pissed off that I picked up the phone and called Marcus for the first time. It rang twice before he picked up. Diana? Marcus sounded surprised. What's your problem, Marcus? You said it was just an act, but you're the one throwing tantrums, disappearing without a word. Are you breaking up with me or what? You barged into my life, made everyone think I'm your girlfriend, and now they think you dumped me. Do you have no respect for me? I ranted without thinking, my eyes squeezed shut. After a long silence and no response, I squinted at my phone and realized he hadn't hung up. Say something. I urged, irritated. Did you drink? He asked. Why does that matter? My coworkers are asking if we broke up, and I have no idea. You need to come here and tell them. Disappearing like this, are you even a man? Marcus was quiet for a moment, then his calm voice came through. Diana, we really should change our roles. I know, you don't want to act anymore, just say it. If you tell me, I won't bother you. I'll leave you alone, I swear. Send me your address. I'll come over to talk to you. In my drunken state, I handed my phone to a colleague who looked stunned. I slurred, send him the address. Let him come and tell you all what's going on. I don't know anything. Then, I just slumped over the table and fell asleep. It wasn't long before Marcus arrived. Sorry to bother you all, he said, his voice smooth. No trouble at all, Mr. Anderson. You and Diana. We're getting married. I snapped awake at that, sitting up straight, my eyes locking onto Marcus. Who's getting married? Are you trying to pretend like we're getting married now? Marcus flashed a smile at the others, then effortlessly scooped me up in his arms and started walking toward the door. He put me in the car and asked, "Still awake?" I suddenly felt clear-headed again. And I realized what I'd just done. The embarrassment hit me instantly. I'll tell you what our relationship really is. I was stunned for a moment, suddenly feeling a strange discomfort. What was I doing? We were just pretending to be a couple, so why did I feel the need to clarify everything? Why had I forgotten the rules of adulthood? I forced a smile and said, "I know, you don't want to keep pretending. I just thought you should say something properly. I was worried something might happen to you." Marcus nodded. "You're right. I don't want to keep pretending anymore." My forced smile started to falter, and the pressure in my chest grew heavier. The thing is, a fake boyfriend doesn't even have the right to feel jealous, so I'm done pretending. Diana, I want to marry you, not as part of a play, but as my real wife. Marcus looked at me seriously, and I was taken aback. Charles was right about one thing, I've liked you for a long time. I actually knew you before I knew you were his girlfriend, he continued. I was even more confused. You mean, you saw me dance? I asked, trying to piece it together. Yeah, at first, it was someone else who invited me. I didn't really know or care about dance, but there was something about you on stage that drew me in. So later, whenever someone mentioned your performance, I made a point to come see you. But I didn't expect that when we finally met, you were Charles's girlfriend. Even though I felt disappointed, I still hid my feelings for you and kept you in my heart. Even though I still occasionally kept track of your updates, I could control it. But that night, you were the one who came on to me. I knew you wanted to get back at Charles, so I was willing to play the role and get close to you. To me, this was never just an act. Although I let you use me, after all this time, when I saw how much you still cared about Charles, I lost control. I didn't care about Charles. I couldn't stop myself from interrupting him. This was truly an injustice. I hadn't cared about Charles since he betrayed me, my only goal was revenge, not to have any other feelings for him. Marcus smiled gently and reached out to pinch my cheek. I know. When you called me, that's when I understood. That's why I had the courage to propose marriage. His words turned everything in my mind upside down in an instant. It felt like I had found an outlet for my emotions, and before I knew it, I started crying uncontrollably. Marcus panicked, his fingers trembling as he wiped away my tears. It's okay if you don't want to, I'm not forcing you. I clung to his shirt, crying without any dignity. I thought I was really that unlucky, losing again in such a short time. It's fine not becoming Charles's aunt-in-law, but to mess up with Marcus too, now that would be embarrassing beyond belief. Marcus froze for a moment, then slowly smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. He let me wipe my tears on his shirt. That's not happening. We're still getting married. My emotions started to calm down, but I shook my head between sobs. Marcus furrowed his brows. You don't want to? I turned away, annoyed by how contradictory this man was. Just a moment ago, he said it was fine if I didn't want to, but now his face was showing a different expression. How can anyone get married without dating? It's got no sense of ceremony. Everything before this was fake for me. Since you've officially confessed, we need to do things properly, step by step, no shortcuts. Only then did Marcus's face relax, his smile deepening as he pulled me into his arms. Okay, not a single step left out.